For my global learning project, I decided that I wanted to sit down with someone who was of a different religion than I am. Personally, I believe religion plays a huge part in one's culture and is a really large role in their identity. Growing up, I was raised Catholic, born and raised Catholic, which Catholicism is a form of Christianity. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the Catholic and Christian traditions, specifically their holidays. So for me, I wanted to sit down and interact with someone who wasn't Catholic or any form of Christianity. Where I grew up, everyone who attended my high school kind of looked like me and was also Christian. There wasn't a huge array of diversity, so I thought now would be a great time to kind of learn more about more religions. So I decided to sit down with senior Blake Rubin. Um, and Blake is a young Jewish woman, and she's very involved with the Jewish community here at Michigan State, but it also played a huge role in her life back at home in Connecticut and especially in high school. During my conversations with Blake, we really honed in on the holidays. We obviously have a lot of differences in our holidays, but I was really surprised by how different they actually are. The first thing that I want to mention is in Judaism, most, if not all, of the holidays last more than one day. For example, Hanukkah is 8 days, and each night has a specific meaning, and each night is equally as important. But towards the end of Hanukkah, it becomes more and more important, which I always thought that it was just a one long celebration, but I never knew that each night had a specific meaning. And another thing was that we both celebrate Thanksgiving, and I just assumed that all of our Thanksgiving traditions were the same, but they're actually not at all. For me, Thanksgiving is, we don't go to church or anything on Thanksgiving, but we usually have dinner with all of my family, and we eat dinner earlier and have a lot of the traditional foods, where in Judaism, they also have a lot of the traditional Thanksgiving foods, but Thanksgiving is celebrated during lunch, and in Blake's family, it's really important that you go to temple on the day of Thanksgiving, which to me, I've never gone to church on Thanksgiving, but I do on most of my holidays. And that's kind of where I was like, Blake and I do have similarities, is I go to church and she goes to temple, where like we both are, in touch with our religious beliefs. Blake and I both went to a public school. I went to a public school here in Michigan. Blake is from Westport, Connecticut, so she went to public school there. And what I thought was really interesting was for every holiday that I've ever celebrated, school was canceled. We didn't have school. School was off, so we could observe our holiday. But for Blake, that's not the case. She had school during most of her holidays, especially like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which fall in the early weeks of the start of the school year, usually the beginning of September. And she said that the teachers would just give the Jewish students like an acceptance, saying like, okay, you don't need to turn in your homework tomorrow because you are celebrating a Jewish holiday tonight. But I never experienced something like that, because for every holiday that I celebrated, we didn't have school. We were usually on a break, which was really interesting to me. Aside from our holidays being different, I learned about Blake's family's food habits, which are very different from mine. So in Judaism, there's this thing called kosher, which I had heard of kosher before, but I didn't think that people actually kept kosher, but in Blake's family they do. So to be kosher, it means that you never would eat meat or cheese at the same time, meat or dairy. They can't be touching, you can't eat them at the same time. And Blake also does not eat any form of pork in her family. So I kind of always thought that if you were kosher, it just stopped at not allowing your meats and your dairies to touch, but that's not the case. In Blake's family, they have silverware that is kosher silverware and non-kosher silverware. They have 2 dishwashers in their kitchen, and one is for their kosher silverware and dishes, and one is for their non-kosher silverware and dishes. I was really surprised by this. I wasn't surprised that Blake kept kosher, but I was surprised about the dishwasher and the dishes. And she told me that her family is pretty religious, so it's not typical of all Jewish people to have separate dishwashers or separate sets of silverware, but it's not uncommon either. In Blake's family, it's also super important that any type of healthcare professional they see or interact with is Jewish. Their dentist is Jewish, all of their doctors are Jewish, any type of person that they see for medical care is Jewish. And I told her that I was very surprised by that, and I didn't know that it was common for Jewish people to prefer to only see Jewish doctors or Jewish dentists. And she was very surprised that it wasn't important to me that I only see Catholic doctors or Catholic dentists. And I said, no, like my pediatrician actually was Jewish, but it just, that's how it was. It wasn't an important part for my parents or for my religion that we see a doctor who is Christian or Catholic. So it was really cool in that scenario because we were both really surprised. Like I was really surprised that she did that, and she was really surprised that it wasn't important to me to see Catholic or Christian healthcare providers. I feel like in this video so far I've really focused on our differences, but we do have something pretty similar. So growing up, I went to catechism for first grade until my freshman year of high school. It was basically like Catholic school. I went one day a week, and it was to prepare me to become a member of my church at the age of 14. Well, in Judaism, at the age of 13, if you're a girl, you become bat mitzvahed, and if you're a boy, you become bar mitzvahed, and you are seen as an adult or a member of the temple in the Jewish religion. And I had never really realized that those events were pretty similar in their meaning and in the timeline. So we were the same age when we both became a member of our like religious areas or religious places, my church and her temple. So I thought that was kind of cool because I always kind of thought that bar mitzvahs are what made Judaism and so different from being like confirmed in Catholicism, but really they were much similar. And Blake was kind of like, yeah, I knew that you being confirmed was really similar to me being bat mitzvahed. But what's really cool is Blake actually went to Israel to become bat mitzvahed. So she had a bat mitzvah at her temple in Connecticut, and then she went to Israel and became bat mitzvahed there as well. She said a lot of people do that in Judaism, to go to Israel and become bat or bar mitzvahed, but in Catholicism, to be confirmed is done in your church because you are becoming an official member of that parish or congregation. To relate my interaction with Blake back to our class and what we've covered so far in TE 150, I think about the dimensions of culture and one of them being comfortable with change. I know in my family we've kept traditions around for a while, but we also kind of stray away from them and do different things, especially around the holidays. But Blake told me that in her family and her culture, they're not comfortable with change because they don't ever break away from traditions that they have. Like the traditions have been in her family forever, and it's really important to her and her Jewish culture that they keep these traditions alive and continue to pass them on to the future generations in their family. I also think of the term ethnocentric and kind of basing making your judgments or your assumptions about other religions based off of yours as the point of reference. I was doing that for sure coming into this interaction, kind of saying, well, that's different from mine, that's different from this. But then I realized that, yeah, all religions are different, and that's what makes them a part of your cultural identity. And after sitting down and talking with Blake, it was really interesting to see, like, yeah, this is her point of reference, and this is my point of reference, and we still can do things similarly and differently, even though we have different points of reference. And I think it's important to kind of stray away from the ethnocentric view and realize that there are different approaches to all different religions. And just because you have one doesn't mean it's like the norm or the perfect reference point. Also, after reflecting on my interaction with Blake, I thought it was pretty evident that she had an issue with equality, with the representation of her religion in the school system. The prime example being the Christian kids had all of their holidays off for school, but the Jewish kids, school was still in session. That's not equality right there. You're not treating all kids the same way. And that is something Blake had to experience in school, but I never had to. After sitting down and meeting with Blake for the first time, I'm really happy that I chose her to work with for my global learning project, and I really look forward to going to Hillel with her and eating at a Shabbat dinner and really even immersing myself in the religion more.